Well, just 4 weeks ago, Santa Fe High School students took part in a nationwide walkout against gun violence. It was part of the Never Again campaign for tougher gun laws, started in February by survivors of the Parkland massacre. That was the third deadliest school shooting in US history, but they've become a worrying trend. Well, to discuss this further, we can now bring in radio talk show host Dave Perkins, who's not too far away, actually, from that scene. Dave, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's look at some of the information that's coming through then. It's the 22nd school shooting in the US just this year. I mean, why are these cases becoming so tragically common?
Well, I'm, first of all, not at all sure that statistic is correct. The people who compile those for the purposes of propaganda against against the Second Amendment tend to include every kind of incident they can, and that I think is more like the fourth or fifth if you consider a student walking onto campus or an ex-student with a gun, killing as many of his former fellow students as he can. That doesn't happen 22 times in 5 months. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. It does happen seemingly more regularly, though, and I think you have to consider this question. When I was a boy in school in Texas in the 70s, I remember guns in gun racks in the rear windows of students' pickup trucks. I remember not too long before that there was PE, which included coaches teaching riflery, teaching boys and girls to shoot in phys ed classes. And ultimately, the statement that can be made with confidence is the access to guns hasn't changed. Americans have always had guns, but we haven't always had young men who want to make a statement by killing as many people as possible at a school. So my question is, what has changed in the young men? What has changed in the culture? What has changed in the upbringing? We have 120 million legal, law-abiding gun owners in America who didn't shoot anyone today. And so the guns, I don't think, can be said to be the problem. The problem is boys have changed. Why and how, and what can we do to reverse that and get ourselves back to a culture in which this idea doesn't occur to them? It's a huge question, I know, but gun control is a huge question too, and not likely to be successful and likely to cause chaos in American politics for a very long time if it's tried. We had Barack Obama thinking of ways to do it for 8 years, and in the end he failed to try, and the people most eager to do it in Congress ended up getting unelected. Gun control is very much a third rail in American politics, and I know it seems crazy to people from outside, but there's a government website that shows that millions of crimes a year, including murders, robberies, assaults, are stopped by people who own guns and use them for self-defense. And if you made guns illegal in this country, if you succeeded in doing that, you would unleash the biggest crime wave, in my opinion, in the history of humanity. But that's my side.
OK, and also focusing on that side then, I mean, we'll come back to the NRA and also the gun lobby, what you touched on before, but let's also look at some of the other maybe practical measures that you've touched on. People are focusing on the laws governing the purchase of firearms, as you say, criticism and support either way. But what about the rules on how they're stored? It looks like this shooter got the guns from his father. Perhaps that would be one aspect that could be tackled, yes?
It could be. I prefer to think of it in terms of simple security, Kate. I know we don't want to get away from the guns, but the guns situation is not going to change, in my opinion, politically here for a very long time. And it's going to take a lot more chaos than what we've had so far, even though it's big in the media right now. The thing that bothers me is this country has learned to fortify office buildings, bank buildings, government buildings. They have security, magnetic doors with key locks. They have armed guards. They have metal detectors. There are many more of those buildings than there are schools in America. And yet, after all the school shootings and all the political chatter about school shootings, no one has made a move nationally to secure schools in the same manner that government buildings, bank buildings, office towers, etc. are secured. Even doctors' offices, pharmacies, buildings with a reason to suspect that someone will come in with mayhem on their mind have security. Why hasn't that move been made? We've been talking about this since Columbine in the 1990s? Why have we let an entire generation of American students grow up at risk of this without making any effort to secure the buildings in the same way that is so commonly done for other buildings across the country? It seems to me like you could start a GoFundMe page, and the parents and the families in school district would be happy to absorb this cost. You wouldn't even have to tax and spend from a government point of view. The people would do it themselves. You've got to secure the schools, and that's not just against guns. It's against anyone coming in with any kind of mayhem on their mind. It's common sense, and I don't know why we're doing it, except I fear that the people who want gun control are trying to capitalize on these instances to try to get the public in favor of gun control. It hasn't worked yet. It's not going to work this time. I vote for security for school buildings. It's common sense.
Well, let's also look at the aspects here. You're in favour of it, you're backing up the NRA, but there has, on the other side, been widespread criticism of the gun lobby, especially the NRA, in blocking those gun control laws, and they have broad public support. Do you think, then, is there an argument there that the NRA and the gun lobby bear any responsibility for what is happening?
No, the NRA has about 6 million members. They were originally formed to make sure that laws were not passed and movements were not grown to disarm black people shortly after they were emancipated from slavery by the Republican Abraham Lincoln, because that was the move of the Democrat Party at the time, was to terrorize and intimidate black people, and disarming them with local and city rules to that effect was one of the things they did. The NRA was formed to prevent that from happening. The NRA is a tiny sliver of America's population, but what it represents is how the public feels, the majority of the public. We have 120 million voting age Americans who do not violate the law, who legally own about 300 million firearms. That is a massive amount of tradition and loyalty and respect for what the founding fathers said was given to us by God, the right to be armed, to defend ourselves. America is unique in the world in that it has such a strong affinity for being armed, and I do not believe there is a political movement in sight. You named the NRA 3 times, including twice in the sentence to this question. I haven't talked about the NRA at all. They're just a representative. They're not a driving force. Much more money is spent by unions, by Planned Parenthood, by all sorts of left-wing organizations than is spent by the NRA on politics. Their annual spending is only a couple of million a year. There are groups in this country that spend 100 times that much, but everyone talks about the NRA's unfair influence on politics. I think you need to just drop them from the discussion and talk about it from the point of view of the people. The people's right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, because God gave man the right to be free, and to be free is to be able to defend yourself. The unarmed man, the disarmed man, is the slave to the armed man, and that is why we are so suspicious of government trying to disarm us, because it seems like a tyranny is coming.
And on that note, we'll leave it. Talk show host Dave Perkins, many thanks. Thank you.